Hello guys, welcome to this video. All right, so as you can see, this is a mock system design interview video. This guy actually reached out to me on LinkedIn and he mentioned that he's preparing for the final round of interview at Yelp, which usually consists of data structures and algorithms, system design, and behavioral interviews. So we decided to conduct mock interview sessions for each of these. We have already done the ones for data structures and algorithms, but unfortunately, we didn't record it well enough, so I can't post it. Hopefully, we do another one and I'll be able to post that. And then this is the system design one. We are yet to do the behavioral interview one. So I decided that let's record this. He actually wanted to stay anonymous, so I'm going to be blurring his face in this video, and I hope this would help somebody in their preparation or generally in their software engineering journey. So enjoy the video. Cheers.
Even though probably can't see they wouldn't be able to see my face. But essentially, what's going on is, I have well, hello YouTube. I have an interview, Yelp for a software engineer position coming up, in the coming weeks, and then yeah, so I reached out to Ibini because I've been following him since last year to simulate mock style interview, and then yeah, so we're here. As far as my experience, I have about like a year and some change, or year, almost 2 years of experience in the field.
Yeah, and some change.
Yeah,
Still
I
practice.
know, I know. I had to change it. Yeah, I had to change it.
All right, all right. So we're going to be using the same um link that we used the last time.
Just let
I
me
don't know
just
if you still
start
have
this.
it. Yeah, still check. So if it's not there, let me know so that I can
Yeah, I do.
share that.
So let's see.
So I created a new tab for system design.
Yeah, no, I have it there. I just want to make sure um what the video is able to capture. Well, on my
Now I
screen it
can see
says
your
it's
screen. Yeah,
capturing the screen, so I just want to make sure.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I can see your screen. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the question.
okay.
Yeah. Feel free. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me share a couple of things. Let me know a couple of things. In terms of like time. So I'm looking at for this particular question. I'm looking at 30 minutes, right?
30 minutes.
And
Okay.
then after 30 minutes, then we can have like discussion about the solution, and then I can ask some follow-up questions, and then you can ask questions as well. That sounds good.
Okay. Yeah,
All right.
that's definitely sounds good to me.
All right.
Okay. That's great time here. Okay, so just give me a second. Let me read the question. So it says design a scalable and reliable system to handle user reviews for businesses on concept follow functional requirements. Review submission. Users should be able to submit reviews for businesses. Okay. A review consists of a rating 1 to 5 stars, open text with a maximum of 500 characters. Optional text not open. Okay, so optional photos. A user should be able to edit and delete their reviews within a reasonable time frame. So edits, okay. So review retrieval. The system should efficiently retrieve reviews for specific, okay. The system should support pagination, okay. Um, review display. Review should be able to appear on business pages, okay. Okay. The system needs to associate each review with a specific user, okay. Non-functional requirements. Okay, so we want to perform on scalability. This system should be able to handle large reviews. Okay, IG 1 million per day. Okay, performance submission should have low latency. Okay, retrieve Review retrieval for a business should be highly performant. Okay. Availability and reliability. Okay. The system should be available. Like okay. The system should be reliable. Okay. No data loss. Okay. So eventually, consistency is acceptable. Stronger consistency is preferred for submissions. Edits, deletion.
Yeah.
All right. So off the top, how do I want to start this?
You can
Like,
start with questions.
so
Do you have
just
like anything to clarify, or do you get
yeah.
everything?
So well, for one, when you say the non-functional requirement, so like in part of, well, basically part of the design, am I supposed to take into consideration handling like can you expand on security on this? Like, do I need to make sure said route like
Mm.
is or like basically to be able to um review or put out a review for a business, does said user need to be authenticated? That means like registered with Yelp.
Yeah, so
Like
that's your decision, right? You get to decide
okay,
that based on the requirement. So the requirement is telling you that this process or this system should be secure, should prevent like common attacks, right? So you have to now look at, okay, what are the common attacks people can try to access
yeah,
it, and people can try to like spam, maybe send spam requests, things like that, right? And then you
yeah.
can now, considering that, you can maybe suggest ways we can mitigate that.
Okay. Okay. So just to make things simple based off what you said, so we can basically assume, let's just assume in order to put in a review, right, you have to be registered with Yelp. So like can we assume that is that safe to assume? Okay. Consistency. And with in terms of where is it here? You said minimal data loss. Yeah, right. Rather, we're handling, images and stuff like that. So is it okay to source out from like the independence, this in like say AWS S3, or we have to do everything in-house?
I mean, if you think doing it in-house is fine, then you should do it. But if you think
Okay, okay, yeah, definitely.
outsourcing, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely outsourcing to like a third party provider because I think it'd be easier. Okay. Yeah, this seems good to me very much as extremely clear. I don't see any reasons as to ask further questions. It's actually quite clear to me. So essentially a system where you our users can, it could be anonymous, it could be non-anonymous, but let's just say non-anonymous people. So our users should essentially be able to put out reviews for said businesses. Okay. And then it should be reliable, performance. All right. Um, how do we want to approach this? So um, do you want me to um define the low level design? So like the schema
Mm.
of the application or like the higher overview of what the application is supposed to look like? Like the
Let's start
database
with
schema, like
yeah, let's start with high level, right? Then
high
we'll narrow
level.
it down to low level.
Okay. So let's say because well, let's just start with let's say answer, right? So let's just say you've addressed the security points right here, right? We would need to use some sort of to prevent like say brute force DDoSing our system and all which will rack high bills and so. So we can use a provider like Cloudflare to basically have to basically to solve the security issue, solve say let's say solve security, we can use a provider like Cloudflare to mitigate DDoS, denial of service. Okay, as far as like consistency, let me, this is kind of hard to And so design a
So
scalable system.
so let me guide you a little bit so you don't get
Okay.
lost in the process. So let's start. So like I said, let's start with eye level design. So by eye level design, just look at it like a eye level view of what the whole application looks like. And when I say application in this case, I'm talking about like the whole thing, the front end, the back end, the deployment part of the system. All right. So when you look at it from afar, what do you see? Uh, what does it Is it going to be a microservice architecture? Is it going to be monolithic? Are you going to have the front end and back end together in one deployment or
Together.
in one server? Yeah, so things like that.
Okay.
And then we are going to drill down
Okay.
into like individual components.
Okay. Okay. So let's. Okay. I'm thankful for that because that just made things a lot more clear. So let's just say at first we would have our front end, right? This would be let's say we'll use a CDN so that it would be easy for faster because you said quick responses, right? CDNs, cache based on said user's location. So we'll use a CDN, maybe a CDN provider like Cloudflare to deploy the front end, right? Right. And then as far as the back end, right? So let's just say a few components we would have. We will need an entryway into our application. So we'll say an API gateway, an API, so let's just say a gateway. This is essentially the entry point into our application. Let's say a gateway or maybe a load balancer, something like Nginx, right? A load balancer, API gateway slash load balancer, Nginx. Let's just say something like Nginx. Um, Essentially, because we're going with a microservice architecture, just because it's more
Why?
modular. I mean, just because it's more modular, right? Because say for example, um, let's not go with a microservice. Let's not make things challenging. Let's just go with a simple monolith.
Okay.
Because we're strictly addressing. Actually, give me a second. Let me think about this first. Let me
Okay.
think. You go with a
And so
microservice.
so let me also mention that it's okay to like start simple, and then like when I ask certain questions, then you can now justify changing it. You get my point.
Right,
So you don't have to like
right,
get it perfectly the first time. Yeah.
right. Okay. Okay. So in that case, because the system says design a scalable and reliable system to handle user reviews for businesses on Yelp.
Do you think you would need like some kind of place to maybe draw components or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, it would be a lot easier. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let me try
Yeah.
to
So
see.
whilst you're doing that, let me
Yeah.
get a few things. Let's see database. See database. Let's go with relational. Right. Uh,
And you see the link I sent? Let me just make sure
second.
I get this.
Yeah, I see the link. Yeah. Okay. But before that, that means I'll share my whole screen. Just a second. Let me stop presenting. Right. So I'm just going to define the requirements. Then over here in the Excel drawer, we can then plug in things.
All right.
Right. So let's just say this is the overall view would look something like this, where we have a front end, a back end, and then a database. Right. We're making things simple. Right. So we're going with a monolithic style architecture, and then we can then break components. Yeah, a monolith should be able to handle this. So yeah, so let's say let's address the business side of things. Actually, no, give me a second.
Also, let me also clarify something. So when you say monolith, do you mean that um the front end and the back end are the same, like are inside the same server, or the monolith is just
The back
the back
end.
end server?
Yeah, just the back end. So we have all the services within um um say a bundle or a binary that we deploy to the cloud.
All right, all right.
Right. So let me just think for a second. I'm still trying to juggle between either a monolith or this because I might go down the road of saying how do you want to, but you know what, let me not go down that road. Let's just go with
Yeah.
simple monolith, right?
So when it
Let's just
comes to
say
the high level design, right? It doesn't really matter whether it's
okay,
monolith or not because all we are seeing from a higher level is just that there's a backend, right?
right,
When we now drill down into the backend, then we'll see whether this backend is a monolith server, so it's a couple of microservices here,
right, yeah, okay, yeah, thank you for that. That definitely helps me a lot more. So let's just say we'll have a single monolith, and let's just
right?
say within that monolith we have a reviews module, right? Let's call it reviews
No, no,
module.
hold on. So
Now,
just leave it at backend. You can just leave it at backend and tell me that's a monolith, right? Then
okay,
we'll pick front end, then we'll pick backend. I don't get my point, and then we'll pick database. I mean, we can pick backend and database together, and then we'll drill into that.
okay. I'm sorry,
Um,
I don't follow.
so let me
I don't.
just ask questions. So so we are going to have like a front end server, right? Separate. We're going to have our backend
Correct,
server or servers separate, and then we're going to have like a database, right? Um,
correct,
then you mentioned something about an API gateway earlier or a a load balancer,
correct.
right?
Yeah,
So
correct.
why use is it an API gateway or a load balancer? Which of them? Because they are two different
So
things.
like because we're no longer going with an API, we're no longer going with a microservice, so we can use a load balancer, right? That would just essentially sit behind all our backend, so we can have multiple monoliths, right? But then we have a single load balancer that would
Okay.
basically able to
To route the
serve based
request.
on the, yeah, exactly, based on route the request to said monolith. So we can go with that. So we can see, yeah, we have a load balancer, and then we'll have the say multiple monoliths, right? So now I'm just gonna, this is the overall view of the each component, right?
All right.
So within the backend, we would have the load balancer, which essentially routes to said monolith, and then we'll have a monolith that will contain, the application code to do the logic, right?
All right.
Now we can go to the draw
Then
thing.
sorry for your database. What
Correct.
kind of
So
database are you looking to use?
we're gonna use we're gonna use because this is the one I have the most experience with. So I'm gonna say well, a few things, right? I have a lot more experience with relational database, and also um we want to be able to relate data to said business. Like a
Mm,
relational database is, best for that because we're intertwining with different entities. We're keeping relation to, we want to see for said business, their reviews. I think a relational database is good for that, right? Um, but yeah, are you following along with me now?
yes, yes. I'm with you.
Okay. So with respect to the diagram, how do you want me to, you want me to start off with the front end or just dive into the back end and then the front? Well, actually, you know what? This is what our overall architecture looks like. Let me
Yeah.
explain to you.
In fact,
So let's
that's
say,
the first thing I want to see.
yeah, right. So let's say we have a front end, right? And then say we have back end. This would be say within we have a backend. Let's call this can I call this and then just to make things extremely simple, we'll just say they communicate via um a REST communication, right? We can just make that super simple.
Rest API.
Yeah, yeah, REST API, yeah. Let's do that. Let's So now within this backend service, we'll have a load balancer.
Is the load balancer within the backend service though, or outside of it?
It would, in this case, it would sit. Let me think about it. I've never really used a
Mm,
load balancer, but I'm gonna. assume it's within. Let me think. Yeah, so we can say it would be within the back end, like the say actually no, scratch that. So this back end would essentially be a private cloud. So like what is it called again? A virtual
AVPC.
yeah, VPC, yeah, virtual private cloud, yeah. So essentially we'll have one entry point, right? Which would be say a set machine, which would be the load balancer, right? And within that load balancer, we're then able to then the load balancer routes to different monoliths
Mm.
within the service or different machines,
Mm.
right?
Okay, I get your point. I get your point.
Right. And then let's just say this last layer we have a database. I'm gonna have to research more about virtual private clouds. I just know the general idea, but yeah. So let's say we have a load balancer here. It would just be a single machine, say running, say an Nginx instance, right? Because Nginx is good for that,
I mean, you
right?
don't have to
So then
specify
we
that
can
it's Nginx. Just put load balancer.
okay, so that's
That
that's
works. Because I mean, Nginx is not it's not necessarily a load balancer. It can be used as
it can be
as
used.
a
Yeah,
load balancer, but that's not like primarily.
yeah,
Yeah, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so now let's. This is then what the backend will be. It'll be like multiple monoliths within the backend, right? And then yeah. So this would be the overall view of the system from the top. Now within this system, we'll then be able to like uh right within this each backend will then have multiple services, right? They're obviously going to be communicating with the database. Now the issue with this is or rather let me think. The issue with this problem is we can only have set amount of connection pooling. We can possibly instead of this instead of this, let's just have a single monolith
Okay. All right.
because we don't want to face the issue with database pooling, connection pooling. So we can just have one single system and then we can scale up vertically, right?
So in this case, do we still
Yes.
need the load balancer?
Um, we don't. No, we don't. So we actually don't need that anymore. No, we don't necessarily need the balance anymore. Um, we can say take this out, right? But just give me a second. Let me think. I'm gonna think out loud. Uh,
Also, remember, right? So I'm also dropping this int, and I'm coming in once in a while so that you don't. I know you have the tendency to overthink. So when I see that you want to
yes,
overthink it, I will come in. So just know that
yeah, no.
this is for now. I might come in and ask you certain questions that will prompt you to make certain changes, right? And that is fine.
Okay, right. Okay. So yeah, so this is essentially what the overall system architecture would look like. Um, now to if we say I'm gonna put this side by side just a second. Yeah, side by side. So it's
I think we have to.
I just hope this is not as tiny for the camera or when you're editing.
No, hold on. I think I think there's a better way to move this, but I honestly don't know. So just continue.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with this either. So
Yeah.
let's see, and then we can maybe zoom in a bit. Okay, even less.
So I have a question. Is it a question? Okay, I have a question.
Okay,
So you already mentioned that in terms of like the storage of the media files, maybe the photos or the videos, we're going to be using something like S3, I guess,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
How would that look like? So what would the process look like when a user uploads a picture on the front end, what happens? Does the front end call the back end and then the back end call S3, or does the front end call S3 directly and then gets the link and send to back end? How does that work?
Okay, so everything will be done. The communication will be done via the backend, right? So essentially, what's gonna the process is, um, I mean, how what let's just address this here. So let's say process to saving a review, right? So the front end makes a call, right, to the back end, right? When they make that call, the back end is going to, obviously validate the payload, make sure, like, say the request body is not empty, etc.,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Now, the back end is then going to make an external call to AWS services, to
Mm,
S3 to save the request call, right? And
mhm.
then that way, I know, like, it's because this application, well, the
Yeah.
backend and then the DB is going to be within AWS services, deployed in AWS services. So, like, like in terms of like the upload speed, is that negligible, right?
Mm.
Or how
But
long
what if
it
we don't
takes,
use S3? What if we don't use S3? What
if
if
we
we use
don't
something like Cloudinary or use there's this thing something similar on GCP?
Yeah, so the thing is, I don't again, like, I haven't used Cloudinary, but I'm pretty sure the upload speed, right, is I believe the upload speed shouldn't be an issue, right?
All right.
So you simply but then a caveat is, based off of this question, we need to, from the front end, right, we need to validate that said photo, right, is less than, particular MB, which is 5 MB here. And also we would also need to make sure, like, the request payload itself,
Mm.
right, it's not over a certain megabytes, gigabytes, whatever the case may be, right? So that's a few things we need to verify, right? But then, as far as like the upload to, say, a provider, we would upload said payload to the provider, and then we'll then get back a particular key, right? So using AWS S3, right? I'm pretty sure it's a key value pair where whatever the image is, you store that there and you get a unique key for that image, right? And for that particular review, right, you store this in the DB based on the payload, based on the review object.
Um.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 So
I don't know
so
if
don't
that
worry.
makes
I'm just trying to
sense.
ask. I'm trying to ask certain questions. So I'm trying to like
Okay.
just pick certain parts. I'm using that to like move you in a particular direction. So you've mentioned the database, right? That we're going to be storing
Yeah.
certain things in database. What would the database schema or the structure of database look like? What are the
Okay.
tables we are going to have? What are the entities and things like that?
Correct. Okay. So, um, again, I'm going to ask just a few clarifying questions. So,
Yeah, sure.
with respect to the database, do you want me to are we do you want me to narrow it down to what the business entity will look like, or schema will look like, and the review and schema, or do you want me to
Exactly.
stick?
Yeah,
Pardon me?
I want to know. I want to know all the necessary or all the essential entities, right? That you think we should have, and the relationship between those entities. Um,
Okay.
Typically you should also include the columns, right, in each table, but not necessarily all the columns. So for instance, if we have like a business table, for instance, right, you can just have a business ID and maybe business name. You don't need to have business email and all those things because we really don't care about those things for the purpose of this interview.
Right.
You get.
Okay. Can I put
I mean, you don't have to draw that. You can just list them out just to save
okay,
time because I'm seeing that this thing
yes,
is quite
okay. Okay.
a, a handful. Yeah.
Right. So let's this these are the properties of the table. Right. We'll need a
So
primary
you
key.
mean business
So
table,
let's
right?
just call
Instead
it
of business database. You mean business
business
table?
table. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So let's say this table. So we'll say the primary key. Let's just call it say business underscore ID. It would be of type big integer. Say we're using Postgres in this instance, right? Big integer because we are scaling. Where is it? So we're potentially going to have millions of businesses, right? And then big
Okay.
integer is the maximum. Pardon me?
Yeah, continue, continue.
No, so essentially it's going to be of type big int, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's
that's
fine.
the maximum this thing. I forget what the number is, but
Yeah,
that's what we
don't worry.
put in,
It
right?
doesn't really matter at this point. Continue.
Yeah, okay. And then what else do we need? So let's just say the name, make it simple, right? Say of type varchar. I don't know what any number. I'll just use the default. I think it's 255. And then let's just make it simple, just the business ID and the name. And then we
All
need
right.
a review ID. Actually no, we don't. This is it,
Okay.
right?
All right.
We probably want to um make this index unique, right? Or rather, we want to index this column,
You mean the name?
right? Because yeah, index name, so it'll be easy to retrieve, right? That's one of the things, right? And then for
Let's come back to that.
review, yeah, we'll come back to that. This is just a bare bones skeleton, right? So we'll need a review underscore ID, say begins. We'll also need the foreign key because one business can have um
Views.
multiple multiple reviews, right? So we need the
Yeah.
business ID,
Okay.
business ID. There would also be a big int. We'll say make this not null, right? Because we don't want any dangling property. And also we'll need the rating.
All right.
We need a rating. We'll give a small int. I forget the actual this thing, but essentially what we want to do here. But now that I'm thinking about it, since we already know it's only going to be 1 to 5 star rating. Like, there's two ways we can do this. We can either make this an enum, right? Or we
Mm.
can make this a small integer, right? But the caveat to this is we'll then have to define a check. Let's just go with small int, right?
All right.
And then we'll define a property here, check, to check it's between one to
Fine.
five.
Okay.
1 to 5, right? And then what else do we need? We also need it's an optional variable characters. Let's just what do we want to call this? Text. Or let's just say info. And
Yeah,
then
you can
let's
use
just say this
review
would be
review text.
okay, so let's just
Yeah,
call it
that's a good. Yeah.
review underscore text. Let's call it varchar, right? And if what is the maximum of 5,000 characters? In this case, we would also make this also a what is the word I'm looking for? We'll make this a text also, right? This would hold this actually no, let's instead of photo, we're gonna call this photo ID, right? So this is going to reference the bucket in cloud, right? And because like you mentioned, so what I normally did in the past, right,
Yeah.
prior to this text was because I've always used S3 buckets, right? I'll make this instead a varchar of 36. 36 being um that's the maximum length of string for a UU, I think it's a UUID 7, right? But in this case, let's just I think the maximum is this thing, but let's just go with text because it can grow, right? We can use different UUID formats, but yeah, I didn't know about text.
But can you check?
Learn
Can
something,
you check the requirement for the photos again? Check it again. I want you to see
right? So
something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So this instead will be of type, let's just say integer, because up to so wait, just to clarify here, a photo, do we it's a max of 5 photos for each review, correct? Okay. So instead of we can make this just to say it's we can make this a small int which goes up to like about 3,000 or something like that. Right. So we need a photo ID. No, actually, no, we don't need a photo ID here. Sorry, give me a second. Let me think. We don't need a photo ID here because this is the parent table. What else do we need here? Users should be able to edit reviews within a reasonable time frame. Okay. So we need a created ads, which would be of timestamp. And then we also need updated ads, which is of timestamp. Like
All
which
right.
would be not no. So give me a second here. Do we need an updated ad?
Yeah, it's fine
No,
to have a
actually no.
updated that. It's fine to just have it. You can decide to remove it too.
Yeah, sorry. Just give me a second. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I guess that we can do that. I was thinking of doing this in the service layer, but we can also do it in the DB layer, right? Because the questions it says the user shouldn't be able to do that. So we can, I mean, like this is subjective. We can handle the case of updating a review in the service or this, but let's just make it simple, right? So we then have what else do we have? We need a photo table,
All right.
right? And then we
Mhm.
need a say photo underscore. Oh my goodness, I wonder how much time I have. ID, say small int, and then we need the photo key. And then let's call it give a type of text, right? And then we'll give a foreign key, which is review underscore ID of type big eight.
All right.
Right. So this would be the overall the schema for the table, right? Because we're addressing
I think
it.
that's something you're missing.
Okay, just a second. Let me. Okay. So we have the review submission, right? Review should display business page. System should be efficient.
So we know that
Review
review
should be
belongs to is the review is for a particular business, right? But the review was also written by somebody.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we also need that. So in this review table, we also need a user ID, a foreign key. Right, let's just say a user underscore ID. Let's call it big int also, not null, right? And then let's just go over there and then let's say user table, and then we can say user underscore ID. Big is this will be auto incremented. And then let's just give it a name. Right, just make it simple. Let's go with text. Right, for simplicity. Um, as far as the requirements, yeah, this looks good to me. So we need a review on business page, scalability, performance, review submissions, low latency, system should be
So
available.
mm, so we can
Okay,
we
yeah,
can so now that we have like database structure, right? We can move to the API design. What would the API look like? What would the um so you already mentioned that you are going to be using REST, right? What would the endpoints look like? Maybe when a user wants to create a review, right? When they want to fetch reviews, update a review, delete a review, pretty much like the CRUD operation.
okay. So the API designed to create a review, right?
Mm.
In the payload, there are a few things we need, right? Well, for one, right, this particular route to create a review will be a protected route. Say protected, right? Let's just make because one of the requirements here is, or one of the requirements we've agreed to is to enter a review. Said user needs to exist, right? We can't have anonymous users, right? So that's first things first, right? So this route will be protected. So within our APIs, we'll be able to retrieve their information using
Mm.
a middleware, right?
Yes.
But then as far as like the design, it will be a post call to create um an API. So let's just say API slash, we're going to version the API, right?
Mhm.
And then let's just call it review, review, right? And then that'll be the route. And as far as like the body, right? Let's just say the body, right? Let's just say what are the things we need, right? Let's just say we need we need the business ID. Now that I'm thinking about this, within this
Mm.
business table, right?
Yeah.
You know what? Let's not even worry about let's add another field called um UUID, right? It'll
Mm.
be of type UUID,
Why?
right? So because we don't want to expose the business ID, right, to
Mm.
the internet, because I've forgotten the security risk of this, but
So
I
yeah,
forget exactly.
if the business ID is 4, then the user can easily just a malicious user
Yeah,
can
you can
just try
easily.
5 or 6 or 7 or 8,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So I get your point, but now you have
Yeah,
you sort of have two IDs.
right. Yeah, I mean, again, like we have this UUID. Um, right. Okay, so let me explain the reasons for having this way, right? Or you know what? Let's just keep it simple instead of having multiple IDs. I mean, like normally what I'll do is, because auto incrementing, right, is a lot more in terms of insertion, right, into a table. It's a lot better to use you know what? Scratch that. Let's, instead of
So
making
just
this
know that
UUID,
auto
let's
increment
make
and
it,
UUID have like their pros and cons, right? Whichever one you
yeah, the
decide to
pros.
go with.
Yeah. I mean, I personally would go with them too. I would have two different datas. This would,
Mm.
for insertion, easy to insert. But then for this will just be a unique index, right? But then like recently I found out about time sorted um UUIDs, right? So we can also make this a big int, but this would also the ID will be of time sorted IDs. In our service layer, we would need to generate the time sorted ID for this.
So hold on. So that means it's not going to be auto incremented. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, it wouldn't be auto incremented anymore. This wouldn't be auto incremented.
Is
So
that is that the best way to go about it?
I mean, there are pros and cons to everything.
Mm.
I think again, I'm going with this decision to use a time stamped ID, which is a form of UUID, because that way we can still expose that setting. Let me think about
So,
this
so let,
first.
let so let me ask you a particular question. You can also add to your consideration. So because you know that we are looking at building a system that takes in a lot of requests, right? Which means that we're going to have
Correct.
concurrent requests at some point. Right? If
Correct.
you are generating the IDs on the code level,
Timestamp.
right? Don't you think it's possible for us to have a scenario where two requests come into the service at the same time, right?
Um, um, so the one of the benefits of a UUID is it's always unique, right? So we would never, the chances of us having a duplicate is next to slim, but it's still a
Mm,
possibility,
mm,
but it's next to slim, right? Even if we have a concurrent request,
yeah.
right?
All
So
right.
that's
All right.
one of that addresses that addresses that.
But is this a UUID or an integer?
Yeah, the time sorted. It's I believe it's UUID Gen 8, I think. Time sorted UUID. Time sorted UUID. I think is of type 8, right? Time base also known as is generated using current timestamp and okay. It was a library. There was a library I used in Java to do that. But you know what? Let
Yeah,
me
let's
just
just we can
backpedal.
leave it for now.
Let's just make things simple, right? And just make this a not regular UUID, right? Because if we don't want to, in this case, we don't want to have redundant data, right? Where we're having one that we expose and one we don't expose, but we can expose this ID because it's of type UUID. It will be
All
unique,
right.
of course, and then we obviously need to index this name so for easy retrieval, right? But yeah, so
Okay.
let's go
So
back to
sorry.
the
Let's stay a bit on that indexing. Why do
okay.
you? Okay, let's start with can you explain what an index is? Like, what's the advantage of having an index on the table?
So to index it's one of the for easy retrieval for ease of retrieval, so you don't have to iterate the whole DB. That's one of the benefits of indexing a column, right? I don't want to go that much deep, but like in
Mm,
terms of the example I'll use is say you have a dictionary, right? You already know the way the database stores it. There's different formats, but by default, I believe it's a B tree. But like the way it's similar to dictionary, so you have A, all the letters within A are stored in A, all the letters within B are stored in B.
yeah,
So
okay.
if we index a column,
Yeah,
right, behind the scenes, our database creates that type of format, which I believe falls under by default is a B tree type format,
yeah,
right? I think there's three types, but I know
yeah,
by default is B tree
yeah.
Postgres. So that's the reason why I want to index this column. Does that make
Do
sense?
you think? Yeah, 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 I get that. Do you think it's a good idea to index all the columns on a database, considering the fact that indexing one column makes it easier, right? Faster to retrieve, right? What happens if we decide to index every single column on that data?
It would affect our insertion operation. So like we would need to the database behind the scenes would need to do some sort of formats of like restructure things in an orderly manner. Similar to a mean heap or a max heap when you insert, right? It's O of n log n insertion, right? So it's something similar behind the scenes. So we need to reformat. So we don't want to index every single column in a table, but I think a business name should be indexed because say said user wants to search a business name, right? I think it will be easier to search. It'll be faster to search a specific field named uh, for that business because it's indexed. That's the reason why I'm indexing this particular field or column.
All right. We can continue.
Make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go on with the body. So we'll need a business ID. Say let's call it business ID. Maybe of type string. What else do we need to insert? We need the text, photos, rating. So we need just call it text string, call it photos string, and then let's say we need the rating. No, what am I? No, actually, this is rubbish. let's call it rating, and it will be of type. We can possibly make this um just simplify things, make this number, we can make this an enum, but let's just make this a number, right? And then would also part of the request, part of the payload would contain the photo, right? Which would be of what is it called? Multi data, like a byte data. That's
Multi-pass.
just called. Yeah, auto, yeah, multi-part. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so this is what the request payload will look like. Um, when we save, right, because we're still within this, right? At first, I mean, do you want me to go into nitty-gritty of defining
No,
the
no, no, no,
logic
no,
of
no.
what?
That's fine. That's fine. So even
Yes.
for the rest, I don't need the payload, right? I only need the routes, just the URL.
Okay. Okay. So you don't need a payload. Okay.
No, no, no. You can leave the payload. You can leave the payload for the creates, right?
You don't
That
need it.
pretty
Oh,
much.
sorry, you don't need the
Yeah.
route. Like
No,
post.
no, no, no. I need
Okay.
the
Okay.
routes. I mean for the remaining endpoints.
Okay. You only need the body.
Yes, yes. So
Okay. Sorry.
for the read, the update, and the delete, right? You don't have to go into too much details. Just give, oh, this is a post
Correct.
request, and then this is the URL. Yeah,
Correct. Another clarification question. So when you update a review, right?
yeah,
Do we want to is it possible to update the photo?
yes, definitely.
Right. So
It's
we want to
possible. Yeah, it's possible
so
for a
when
user to delete a picture, right? And upload another one.
okay, okay. All right, okay, okay, that makes sense. Um that makes things a bit more complex, but
But yeah,
let's just
you can focus less on that. For this part, I'm more interested in the structure of the URL.
okay. So let's go with retrieve retrieve a review. This would also be this wouldn't be a protected route because we can say we want other people to be able to see a business review, people that are not our users. So this would be a guest request, right? And then because you mentioned, oh, let's make this get reviews, right? We're getting all the reviews, right? We want to paginate, right? So like say it'll be a page, let's just put number and then we do size, which will also be of type number, right? Within service layer, you just want the routes, correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
So so this a review belongs to a business, right?
correct. We also need a
Just the
business.
way, yeah. So just the way
Actually,
we will say
hold on.
that.
You know, to
I'm
retrieve
listening.
all the reviews,
Yeah.
based on a business, right? You're right. We need the business underscore ID. Let's just give it a type. Also, let's just give it a type number, right?
Okay. So
Let me think about it.
my follow-up
Okay,
question, just before you move on, is that
okay,
um, the the route, right? Is it REST compliant? Because you've mentioned that you are building a REST API. So if you look at,
correct.
there are certain things that we look out for, right, in the REST API, and one of those things is that the its REST is resource based, right, which means that um, instead of having review, right, number one, it should be reviews, right? It's usually plural, right, when it comes to REST. Then number two, because a review belongs to a business, you probably want to have slash businesses slash the business ID, then slash the review. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, okay, okay. I see exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, okay. So we can possibly, depending, I mean, like, depending on your preference. So we can say slash business, or let me say, we could do slash business, right? Slash the business ID, right? Let's just
Mm,
say business underscore ID, right? And then slash review. So there's no longer a need for this, right? Yeah, this looks a lot cleaner, right?
yeah.
Right. So we have API versioning, give it a version. Then we need the business, right? The business ID. We need the reviews, right? And then we need the page and then the size. I believe this would satisfy the condition of retrieving a review.
Yeah.
Reviews should be displayed on the business page. Yes, okay. The system needs to associate each review for a specific user. So now, do you want me to define the body type?
No, 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 no.
There's
That's fine. No, yeah, that's fine. Um, let's look more into some of this because I mean basically what you've done so far, right? I think it works, right? So let's look more into the non-functional requirements, right? I think because in terms of the functional requirement, I think we've covered a lot of it. So let's look at the non-functional requirements, starting from security. All right, guys, I'm back here. Apologies, this session is taking longer than expected, and this is actually because this is his first time doing a system design interview, so I'm about to give him more time to express himself, and also for me to give enough feedback and enough hints. The video actually took, sorry, the session actually lasted for about 2 hours. That is plus the feedback I had to give him. So I'm going to be cutting I'm cutting the video into two. This will be the first part, and then the second part will be out very soon. Please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and you like the video. Also drop comments in terms of how you think he did and how I did as an interviewer, and also give suggestions on what we can do better. And I also want to mention that this is something I am going to be doing a lot more of henceforth. So if you are preparing for an interview, feel free to reach out to me and then we can schedule mock interviews. Also, feel free to reach out for code reviews. We're going to be doing a lot more of that this year. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.